So Dana White's Contender Series for the 2023 season has all wrapped up, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the top 10 fighters that were assigned from the season that I think are going to put on some of the most exciting fights now that they're in the UFC. These fighters might not necessarily be fighters that could go all the way, that might not have the highest ceiling in the world, but man, I'm telling you guys, some of these guys are going to be fighting for that fight of the night bonus every single time, and that performance of the night bonus as well. These guys are going to be putting some very fun scraps, and we're going to talk about number 10 in the list here. It is Danny Barlow. I don't know why I also scrolled down on his profile, but he's a welterweight. Now, Danny Barlow, he can be a little bit low volume, but he is a striker for the most part. He does have a little bit of wrestling, but I think that Danny Barlow is going to be in some fantastic fights. He is called Left Hand to God. That is because he has insane power in that left hand. He is a southpaw, and my goodness, can he knock people out. He had a pretty good first round finish over a great fighter in Raheem Forrest, and I think that we could see him in some pretty good scraps in the UFC. The next fighter I wanted to talk about is Brenson Ribeiro. I don't know if he's got any relation to Claudio Ribeiro at all, but he fights exactly like him, just kind of swinging hooks like a little bit of a maniac and just having a good time in there. That's kind of how he fought on Dana White's Contender Series and got a massive upset over Bruno Lopez. Just went in there and he was just throwing, man, and Bruno Lopez never really got going. He's taken on Mingyang Zhang in his UFC debut. That has fight of the night potential for sure. That could be a potentially incredible scrap. I'm looking forward to that fight quite a bit, but I think Brenson Ribeiro in his UFC run could put on some very entertaining fights. The next fighter I wanted to talk about is Denny Silva. He's 11-2. He is a featherweight. He once again also got a little bit of an underdog win because he did go out there and defeat Kevin Vallejos, who was 11-0. And I thought that Kevin Vallejos was going to be able to get after him, but Vallejos was way smaller than Denny Silva in this matchup, and Denny Silva put the pressure on him the whole fight, and that's exactly what he does, man. This guy goes for round one finishes, and he does usually get them. Unfortunately, he couldn't quite get one over Kevin Vallejos, but it was still a good performance. I think we're going to see Denny Silva in some fantastic scraps in the UFC. Ramon Taveras is a guy that fought twice on the Contender Series this year. His second fight against Cortavius Romios was a 29-second war. If you haven't seen it yet, it's only 29 seconds. I'm telling you guys, these guys go after it. They are scrapping in the pocket for about 29 seconds, and it does end up with Tavares getting the KO. He's going to be rematching Sohi Sadie. I don't know why he's doing that. I don't know why the UFC is doing that. If you ask my opinion, I think that Sohi Sadie is going to beat him again, but it still should be a pretty good fight. And I think Ramon Taveras, with his striking and his boxing style, is going to be in some pretty fun fights in the UFC in the future. The next one is Luis Pujuelo. He is from Peru. The guys from Peru, hey man, I got burned a little bit from the guys of Peru, man. I kept picking against them, and they just kept winning. And Luis Pujuelo, he is a brawler. Like, this guy is here to come to war. He's a striker. He wants to scrap it out on the feet. He has crazy power at 145 pounds. I think that he could go pretty far, potentially, if he can keep his fights on the feet. Now, I did pick Robbie Ring to beat him because I just didn't know if Pujuelo could defend the takedowns, but it turns out Robbie Ring had no intention of getting the takedown anyway, and Pujuelo just absolutely dominated on the feet. So, good for Pujuelo, absolute scrapper. He is going to be in some bangers, depending on who he gets matched up against, but this is a guy with some serious power at 145 pounds. Zachary Reese, I think, is also going to be in some fantastic battles, and the interesting part about Zachary Reese is he's 6-0 in his career, and he's got 6 first-round finishes. Now, he necessarily hasn't really fought the best competition in the world, but he just beat Eli Aronov, and Eli Aronov is a very good fighter that I am pretty high on, and he was coming off a win over Mariusz Kowalkiewicz. Now, Zachary Reese, I think that this guy has a lot of potential to go quite far in general. He looks very technical for a middleweight. He looks very composed for a 6-0 guy with a lot of first-round finishes. Like, it's not like he's just going out there like an idiot and finding the finishes. He's actually getting them quite well. Like, he snatched a guillotine on Aaron Phillips when he shot for a takedown. He went after Tommy Britton, snatched up an armbar after getting taken down by Eli Aronov. I don't know what it is about Zachary Reese, but I actually really like him as a middleweight prospect. Now, usually when I see guys that are just getting first round finishes, I have a lot of questions about them. But I think Zachary Reese actually is a solid fighter, and I would love to see him make his debut, hopefully sometime soon. I'd love to see him make his debut in 2023. At the moment, I believe he's in Thailand training over there, so I don't know, maybe we see him at sometime next year. But I think Zachary Reese is definitely a guy with a lot of potential in the UFC, and he's going to be in some fun fights because he's probably going to get a first round finish. Now we've got Denny Silva. Now Denny Silva and this next fighter I'm going to talk about, I could compare them to Trevor Peek in the way that they fight, and Trevor Peek is probably one of the most exciting fighters on the roster in terms of entertainment value. And Denny Silva fights similar to that. Now, he actually looked like he had pretty good boxing against Angel Pacheco. He just boxed up Angel Pacheco for 3 rounds. Kind of looked pretty good on the feet in that matchup. He had a lot of success to the body. Now, there were moments in that Angel Pacheco fight where maybe Denny Silva could have got a finish if he just kind of went to different target areas. Like, he was really honing Pacheco to the body, and then for a while he just didn't go to the body again. But hey, that doesn't matter. What matters is he's going to be in some absolute wars. He throws a lot of hooks. Very, very aggressive, very high volume, very fun fighter. I think we're going to see Denny Silva in some absolute wars and potential fight of the nights. I mean, this guy is going to be in some good fights, and I cannot wait to watch them. Hyder Emil is also a fighter that I could compare to Trevor Peek. Hyder Emil's, he's a brawler. He's there to have a good time, man. His fights are fantastic. Now, his fight against Emre Sonmez wasn't necessarily the most exciting fight in the world, but if you go out there and you watch his previous fights, Hyder Emil's in some good scraps. You know, he throws a lot of bombs. He throws some pretty heavy leather. He throws a lot of hooks. He fights like Trevor Peek. His cardio is not the best, but man, he loves to push through it, and he has some pretty good fights, man. I think that Hyder Emil in the UFC, I mean, he's 33 years old at 145. UFC probably aren't going to do him too many favors in the matchmaking just because he is relatively old to be coming in making his debut. So I think he's going to get in there with a tough guy early on, and no matter what happens, he's going to give them a good scrap, and he's going to have a very, very fun fight. And I think, once again, potential fight of the night material. Peyton Talbert, 6-0. This guy could be very easily compared to Sean O'Malley, and I will be comparing him to Sean O'Malley as he does kind of go up in his career. I think that the UFC potentially sees the same sort of things that I do in Peyton Talbot. He's 5'10", so he's relatively tall for bantamweight. He's a striker. He strikes from range. He's in wars. He has good fights. He has good KO ability. And I think that you could very easily compare Peyton Talbot to Sean O'Malley, and I think that Peyton Talbot himself has an interesting enough personality that he could probably go on to have a lot of star power like Sean O'Malley. Now, Sean O'Malley is kind of like a 1 in a million fighter, you know, like a champion right now, an absolute superstar, one of the biggest names in the UFC. Now, Peyton Talbot might not reach that level of stardom, but he has the potential to reach some sort of level of stardom, maybe similar to that. He's got a very interesting personality. He's a very interesting guy. His fights are incredibly fun. He's kind of built similarly to Sean O'Malley. He fights similarly to Sean O'Malley. Very aggressive, somewhat hittable on the feet, but man, he is going to be in some fantastic fights. His fight on Dana White's Contender Series was awesome. His fights prior to that were also awesome. Like, this guy has a lot of potential, and I think he's going to be in some wars. He's the number 2 fighter on this list of the top 10. His debut is coming up in November, which is relatively soon after his fight on the Contender Series. Very, very happy to see that. I would love to see Peyton Talbot fight relatively often. I do think he can beat Nick Aguirre in this fight. Now, Aguirre is a wrestler. He is a grappler. Tough stylistic matchup potentially for Talbot, but I do think Talbot should be able to get it done. And now we move on to the number 1 fighter, Vinicius Oliveira. Whenever this guy throws a strike, it is with 125% power. This guy, he's not very technical, but my goodness, is he here for a good fight. I think Vinicius Oliveira is a fantastic fighter, but my goodness, he can leave himself open a little bit, but he is in some fun fights. Very, very aggressive. He throws bombs. He throws to land. Like, if you watch his Dana White's Contender Series fight, I don't think he necessarily had the best performance, because in that fight, he was just throwing absolute bombs over hands and hooks, and he just wasn't landing, but he eventually did land, of course. But that is kind of how he fights. He does go out there to just try and take your head off. Now, he was beating up Ali Taleb before he eventually lost that fight, got caught, and he can get caught. That is the problem with Vinicius Oliveira. He is pretty hittable, but my goodness, this guy is going to be in some wars. He's going to be throwing some bombs. I mean, 12 first-round KOs. He's beaten some pretty decent guys in his career as well. I don't know how far the UFC is going to try and push him, like who they're going to give him in his debut. But man, if they can maybe match him up with another striker, we're going to see Vinicius Oliveira in some wars, man. Definitely a future fight of the night type of guy. Absolutely a fun fighter to watch. And I'm very, very excited to see how Vinicius Oliveira does go in UFC. And that's my top 10 list. This video was relatively short. I mean, it was still 10 minutes long, but I'm not feeling 100% at the moment. I just don't know what's going on with me, to be honest. I'm getting sick all the time this year, but hey, it is what it is. And with all that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one. Now, let me know if you've got any ideas for top 10s. Let me know if you think I missed out on a couple of people. I probably did, but this is the list that I come up with. I'm pretty happy with the list. I will probably be making videos in the future. I've got exams at the moment, so I'll be taking a bit of time off, I'd say. But in the future, I'll be making videos about who I think that the UFC should have on Dana White's Contender Series next year in 2024. So that should be pretty exciting, kind of predicting the roster and maybe giving the UFC ideas on who to put on there if they don't know. I don't know. But anyway, with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.